In this video, I want to consider the problem of animal suffering within the broader framework of theodicy, or justifying God's ways to human beings. And in particular, I want to consider the degree to which an uncritical anthropopathism can make the problem of animal suffering worse than it is. This is not to claim that it is not bad. It is definitely bad, but we can make it worse if we're uncritical in projecting human emotion onto animals. To begin with, I want to begin with this quote from Richard Dawkins' River Out of Eden, chapter 4. He begins, this is a very well-known passage for anybody who's engaged in Dawkins and philosophy of religion. So he begins, "My clerical correspondent of the previous chapter found faith through a wasp. Charles Darwin lost his faith with the help of another. I cannot persuade myself," Darwin wrote, "that a beneficent and omnipotent God would have designedly created the Ichneumonidae with the express intention of their feeding within the living bodies of caterpillars. Actually, Darwin's gradual loss of faith, which he downplayed for fear of upsetting his devout wife Emma, had more complex causes. His reference to the Ichneumonidae was aphoristic. The macabre habits to which he referred are shared by their cousins, the digger wasps, whom we met in the previous chapter. A female digger wasp not only lays her eggs in a caterpillar or grasshopper or bee so that her larvae can feed on it, but according to Fabre and others, she carefully guides her sting into each ganglion of the prey's central nervous system so as to paralyze it but not kill it. This way, the meat keeps fresh. It is not known whether the paralysis acts as a general anesthetic or if it is like curare in just freezing the victim's ability to move. If the latter, the prey might be aware of being eaten alive from inside, but unable to move a muscle to do anything about it. This sounds savagely cruel, but as we shall see, nature is not cruel, only pitilessly indifferent." Okay, that's some good writing there. Hats off to Richard Dawkins. But what I want to focus on here, to back up to the previous page again, is how he describes the interior mental life of this insect, or like a caterpillar, for example, and suggesting that the caterpillar could be aware of being eaten from the inside, but unable to move a muscle to do anything about it. In other words, Dawkins is describing the caterpillar as being like one of the characters in the movie Alien, right? The guy who realizes he's got an alien creature gestating inside him that is soon to explode out of his abdomen, and he can do nothing about it. And what a horrible situation that would be. And that is essentially, according to Dawkins, the situation of the caterpillar, that it is being eaten alive from the inside and aware that this is going on, and it's unable to move a muscle to do anything about it. Now, I'm not claiming that caterpillar is having a pleasant experience when it has a digger wasp egg laid within it. What I would actually say is, I, first of all, am not clear that a caterpillar is conscious at all, because caterpillars are very different from human beings. The further you get away from human beings, the more careful we should be about extrapolating consciousness to that entity, all other things being equal. So, for example, we should be very confident that chimpanzees are conscious. We should be confident that dolphins are conscious. We should be confident that dogs are conscious. But when you get to insects, you're at a significantly lower life form in terms of the complexity of it and the distance of that alien life form, I would submit, on the tree of life. Although I'm no great taxonomist in biology, but it seems to me that caterpillars are very much more different from human beings than dolphins, right, who are mammals. And so we should be more skeptical about inferring consciousness and attributing it to caterpillars than we would be to dolphins. The next thing I would want to note is that it would be very, not just contentious, but frankly absurd to attribute to a caterpillar awareness, self-awareness. Because when Dawkins says here that it could be aware of being eaten from the inside, this clearly implies self-knowledge, right? A knowledge of oneself as a being, and that another alien being is existing within oneself and eating itself away from oneself as a parasite. And I guarantee that whether caterpillars are conscious or not, they do not have self-awareness. I think that is pretty clear. what we have here is a couple different things. So first of all, this general term anthropomorphism, that is a reference to speaking about animals as having human form or morphe. Now, this is, in other words, it's an idiom. It's a form of non-literal language where we attribute human-like characteristics to non-human things, including animals. So there are some animals that are quite similar to us, again, and we can speak about them. For example, a dog chewing on a rawhide bone happily. And it's not an anthropomorphism, I think, to describe the dog as happily chewing on the rawhide bone or contentedly chewing on the rawhide bone. But if you want to talk about a caterpillar contentedly residing within its cocoon, I think at that point you are into anthropomorphism. And you are more specifically into anthropopathism. So this is the attribution of pathos, of emotion and conscious human-like experience to non-human things. So specifically the experience of emotions, things like suffering and happiness and excitement and anticipation and joy and so on. And this is definitely a case of uncritical anthropopathism. So it's not to say that the digger wasp or Ichnumonidae do not present problems to Christians that we have to think about. They certainly do. But if you uncritically and naively, frankly, attribute human characteristics to insects and to other animals, you can make the problem worse than it in fact is. Now, to conclude, I just want to show you how tempting anthropopathism is. This short 16-second video of ants, I think, effectively illustrates the siren song, the attraction of anthropopathism, of our tendency, our penchant to attribute human emotions and experience onto non-human living things that are very distant from human beings. So in this video, it shows this one ant is allegedly, helping two other ants up the leaf, and then it gets left behind. And it's sad. What's the first thing we do when we see this short video? So the other ant, he's waving his arms, quote unquote, right? Like this, hey, come get me too. And eventually they don't come and he stops waving his hands. And then his antennas go down like a sad dog. He's like, oh, you left me behind. And we feel really sorry for that ant. And honestly, like that's kind of sad. Okay, but really, are ants conscious? I don't know about that. Are ants self-conscious? Can an ant die of a broken heart? Can it be disappointed? I'm very sure that whatever conscious life ants could possibly have, they do not have the level of consciousness to experience disappointment, sadness, let alone a broken heart. So while we are very tempted to project human emotions onto the sad experience of this ant being left behind by its ungrateful friends, nonetheless, I think we have to recognize that we are uncritically attributing human emotions to that ant. And when we do that, we make the problem of natural evil and specifically animal suffering worse than it is. That's not to say that it's not a big problem. It definitely is. But uncritical anthropomorphism and anthropopathism makes it even worse.